It was just another ordinary morning at the little diner on Maple Street. The scent of fresh coffee floated through the air, and the usual clinking of dishes echoed off the walls. Among the regulars and passing faces, one person stood out, an old blind man who sat quietly outside the diner, day after day, with nothing but a small tin cup and a cardboard sign that read, "Please help. God bless." Most people passed by without a second glance. Some dropped in a few coins. But to Maria, a kind-hearted waitress working double shifts just to make ends meet, he wasn't invisible. Maria had been working at the diner for 3 years. Life hadn't been easy. She was barely scraping by, juggling bills, and taking care of her younger brother after their parents passed away. But no matter how tight things got, she always made sure to pack up a small meal at the end of her shift for the blind man outside. A sandwich, maybe a cup of soup, sometimes just a piece of bread with butter, whatever she could spare. She never asked for anything in return. She never even expected a thank you. It just felt like the right thing to do. Day after day, Maria would sit with him for a moment, placing the food gently into his worn hands, sharing a few quiet words. The man rarely spoke, his voice raspy and low, but over time, they formed a quiet bond. To everyone else, he was just another beggar, forgotten by the world, but to Maria, he was someone who mattered. One rainy evening, soaked from her walk to work and exhausted from a long shift, Maria stepped outside with her usual offering. But instead of the usual silence, the man reached out and softly said, "Asterisk, you've been so kind to me, Maria, but I haven't been honest about who I am." Asterisk, his voice trembled, not from the cold, but from something deeper. She looked at him confused. That was when he added something that made her heart skip a beat. Asterisk, "Ken, not who you think I am. I'm a billionaire." Asterisk. Maria froze, the raindrops running down her face, mixing with the shock that spread across it. She couldn't speak. Her eyes searched his worn face for any sign that this was a joke, but there was only sincerity in his expression. Why would a billionaire sit on the sidewalk every day, blind and alone? Why hadn't he said anything before? What he told her next changed everything. But it wasn't just about money. It was about a test, a secret, and a decision that would turn both their lives upside down. Maria stood frozen, her tray in one hand, the warm meal in the other, steam rising gently in the chilly air. She stared at the man she quietly cared for every day for nearly a year. A billionaire. It made no sense. His clothes were ragged, his hands calloused, and his eyes, though cloudy with blindness, were always kind but tired. Why would a billionaire sit on the sidewalk, pretending to be a beggar? She finally asked, her voice barely louder than the rain. The man gave a small, sad smile. "Because I needed to see something real." Maria didn't know what to say. The idea felt impossible. She glanced around, half expecting someone to jump out with a camera, shouting that it was all some elaborate prank. But there was no one, just the sound of tires hissing on wet roads and the distant murmur of the city winding down for the night. He reached into his coat pocket, slowly, carefully, and pulled out a worn photograph. The edges were frayed, the colors faded. He held it out to her. Her name was Evelyn, my wife. She passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. She was the one who grounded me, who reminded me that money doesn't make you human. Compassion does. Maria took the photo and studied it. A younger version of the man sat smiling beside a woman with warm eyes, holding hands on a beach. They looked happy, normal. She used to volunteer at shelters, sell food to strangers, talk to everyone like they mattered. After she died, I lost myself. I stopped trusting people. Everyone around me only saw the billionaire. I needed to know if kindness still existed without a price tag attached. His words hung heavy in the air. Maria didn't know whether to feel honored, confused, or angry. Was she part of some social experiment, a test? "So this," she said quietly, motioning to his clothes, the sidewalk where he sat every day, "this was all fake." He shook his head slowly. The blindness is real. I lost my sight 3 years ago in an accident. That changed everything. But the rest, the poverty, the begging, that was my choice. I needed to find one person who'd see me, not my bank account. And I found you." Maria's mind raced. This wasn't just about a stranger in need anymore. This was about trust, truth, and something deeper that she couldn't quite put into words. She wanted to believe him, but everything felt upside down. He leaned closer, his voice low. "I've watched you give without asking. I've seen you struggle, yet still offer more than most people with full wallets. I chose you, Maria. But what comes next isn't something you can walk away from easily." Her heart pounded. What did he mean? What exactly had she been chosen for? Maria couldn't sleep that night. She kept replaying the conversation over and over in her head. The image of the blind beggar, now a billionaire in disguise, sitting there with rain dripping from the brim of his cap, telling her that her kindness had meant something more than she ever imagined, just wouldn't leave her mind. Was it all really true? Or was she being played? The next morning, she arrived at the diner early, hoping it had all been a strange dream. But he was there again, sitting in his usual spot, looking just as worn as ever. She brought him coffee and sat next to him, her eyes searching his face for anything that might help her understand. "I didn't mean to lie to you," he said softly. "I just needed time. I needed to be sure." "Sure of what?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "That I'm not just another person chasing money." He nodded, but there was pain in his face. "You don't know how many people disappear the second they find out I have something to give. It's like flipping a switch. I was searching for someone who still knew how to see people without judging them by their wallet." Maria didn't respond right away. She thought of her own life. Long shifts, second-hand shoes, skipped meals to stretch paychecks. Her kindness wasn't about being a saint. She just didn't want to live in a world where people like him were forgotten. But as days passed, his presence brought new weight. A black SUV started parking across the street. A man in a suit stepped out once, watching them from a distance. And one evening, as Maria left the diner, a woman in designer clothes approached her. She introduced herself as Claudia, his assistant. "I'm here to advise you," Claudia said with a tight smile. "What you're getting into isn't simple. You've become part of something bigger now. There are people with interests in Mr. Grant's decisions. People who won't be happy if he rewrites his will based on a waitress's good heart." Maria felt her stomach twist. Will? Interests? What did any of this have to do with her? Claudia handed her a business card. "Just remember, not everyone is thrilled about your sudden connection to him. Be careful, Maria. This world is different from the one you're used to." That night, Maria looked at the blind man, Mr. Grant, differently. Not because she doubted his story, but because now she realized kindness wasn't the only thing being tested. Someone was watching her, and someone didn't want her to stay close. The next few days felt like Maria was walking a tightrope. The small, familiar world of the diner now felt like the center of something much larger, something she hadn't asked to be a part of. The blind man, Mr. Grant, came every day as usual, but now their conversations were heavier, careful. He never mentioned his wealth again, but Maria could sense a growing urgency in his tone, like there was something he wanted to say, but couldn't, at least not yet. Behind the counter, her co-workers started whispering. A few had noticed the black SUV outside. Others spotted the well-dressed strangers occasionally walking past the windows, eyes scanning the room. Maria could feel it too. She wasn't just serving coffee and pancakes anymore. She was being watched. One evening, as she left after closing up, she found her bike tires slashed. A note was tucked under the seat, written in block letters. Asterisk, "Stay away from him." Asterisk, her hands shook as she read it. She didn't tell anyone, not even Mr. Grant. Part of her wanted to walk away from it all, pretend she'd never met him, go back to just being the girl who worked the morning shift and minded her own business. But deep down she couldn't. He needed her, even if he didn't say it outright. and she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about money or some will. There was something deeper, something more human, like he was trying to protect something bigger than himself. A few nights later, Mr. Grant didn't show up. She waited outside longer than usual, scanning the sidewalk. The next day, still nothing. She checked the usual spots, even asked a few other street regulars if they'd seen him. No one had. It was like he'd vanished. Then, just after her shift, Claudia appeared again. She was colder this time, her voice sharper. "He's been moved for his own safety," she said. "There are people who think his judgment's been compromised. His estate is under legal review. Your contact with him is being closely documented." Maria stepped back. "What are you saying?" Claudia sighed. "I'm saying that your involvement could hurt him more than help him. There's a lot of money at stake, and some people don't play fair when billions are on the table." That night, Maria sat alone in her apartment, staring at the photo Mr. Grant had once given her. She felt helpless. But deep down, she knew she couldn't let this end like this. Something wasn't right, and she wasn't going to back down, not now. Not when it mattered most. Maria couldn't sleep. She kept staring at the ceiling, the quiet hum of the fridge the only sound in the dark room. Claudia's words echoed in her mind. Asterisk, your contact with him is being closely documented. Asterisk, what did that even mean? Why was everyone treating her like she was some kind of threat? The next morning, the diner felt different, quieter, heavier. As she poured coffee and smiled through her shift, she noticed a man sitting near the back, alone. He wore a grey coat, dark sunglasses, and kept a newspaper in front of his face, but he wasn't reading it. Every few minutes, his eyes peeked out, scanning the room, landing on her. Maria's gut twisted. Later that day, as she was sweeping outside, a teenager from the neighborhood came running up to her, breathless. "Miss Maria," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Someone left this for you in the alley, said it was urgent." He handed her a small envelope, then took off without another word. Maria stepped into the alley and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a folded note in shaky handwriting. Asterisk, they have locked me away. Claudia's not who she says she is. Trust no one. Asterisk. Her heart dropped. Back inside the diner, Maria excused herself early and raced home, locking the door behind her. She laid the note flat on the table and stared at it. She knew it was real. She recognized the handwriting. Something was very wrong. If Mr. Grant was being held somewhere, and if Claudia was lying, then everything she thought she understood was falling apart. Then her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Maria," a deep voice whispered. "Listen carefully. I don't have much time. They've taken control of my estate. Claudia, she's working with my nephew, Richard. They're trying to declare me mentally unfit, take everything. They're erasing me." "Where are you?" Maria whispered. "I don't know exactly. Some kind of private care facility. They said it's for my safety, but it's a prison. I need your help. There's a folder, documents I hid in a safety deposit box. It's in your name. I signed it over last month. It's the only proof I have." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Maria sat frozen, foam still at her ear. She'd never imagined her simple act of kindness would lead her into a world of betrayal, hidden power, and dangerous secrets. But now she was in the middle of it, and someone out there was watching her every move. The next morning, Maria stood in front of the bank downtown, her heart pounding in her chest. The folder Mr. Grant had mentioned, it was real. Inside the safety deposit box was a thick stack of documents. Legal papers, medical records, handwritten letters, and a video drive. The note on top was clear. Asterisk, if anything happens to me, this proves the truth. Asterisk. Maria took it all straight to a trusted lawyer, an old friend of her late father's who owed her family a favor. When he saw the contents, his eyes widened. "If this is what it looks like," he said, "you're holding the key to stopping a multi-billion-dollar fraud." Within hours, things started moving fast. The lawyer contacted a federal investigator, and soon a court emergency hearing was scheduled. Claudia and Richard had already begun transferring assets, hiding paperwork, making it look like Mr. Grant had signed away control willingly. But the documents told a different story, of forged signatures, altered diagnoses, and a planned takeover maced as a protective guardianship. Maria didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she stood before a courtroom packed with lawyers, reporters, and strangers. Claudia sat across from her, calm and polished, but her eyes were cold. Richard didn't even look up. Then the judge called for the video. The room went silent as the screen flickered to life. Mr. Grant, sitting in the same coat he wore outside the diner, looked into the camera with tired, honest eyes. "My name is Charles Grant," he began. "I may be blind, but I'm not blind to the truth. If you're seeing this, it means I've been silenced. My assistant and my nephew are working together to strip me of everything, using my condition as an excuse. But I'm not crazy. I know what they've done, and I trust one person to help me, Maria." The courtroom shifted. All eyes turned to her. By the time the hearing ended, the judge ruled in Mr. Grant's favor. He was released from the facility and restored as the legal head of his estate. Claudia and Richard were placed under investigation for fraud and elder abuse. It was over. Or so she thought. A week later, Maria received one final letter, hand-delivered and unsigned. Inside was a single line: "Q did the right thing, but some people won't forget." Asterisk. She looked up from the note, eyes scanning the quiet street. The truth had won, but in the world of power and money, truth always came with a shadow. Life slowly returned to a new kind of normal after the courtroom victory, but Maria knew things would never be quite the same. The diner, once just a place where she clocked in and out, now felt different, full of eyes, whispers, and a kind of quiet respect from those who once saw her as just another waitress. Some customers even brought flowers, others left larger tips, and a few just gave her a nod of quiet recognition. Mr. Grant, Charles, as he now insisted she call him, didn't return to the sidewalk outside. He stayed mostly out of public view, recovering from the ordeal and quietly setting his affairs in order. But one afternoon he visited the diner, dressed in a simple coat, leaning on a cane. The moment he stepped inside, everyone fell silent. He walked over to Maria's station, smiled, and said, "You saved my life." He wasn't exaggerating. Without her compassion and persistence, he might have been lost to the lies wrapped around him. That day, over coffee at her favorite booth, Charles told her something that surprised her more than anything else. "I want you to manage a foundation," he said. "Something small but powerful, focused on people like you, those who give without expecting anything. We'll call it Evelyn's Table, after my wife." Maria was stunned. She'd never run anything like that. But Charles believed in her, and in time, she came to believe in herself too. The foundation helped fund meals, shelters, job training programs, and scholarships for underprivileged youth, starting in their own city, then quietly expanding. It wasn't flashy, but it changed lives in quiet, powerful ways. Still, Maria never forgot the note. Asterisk, some people won't forget. Asterisk, there were days she felt watched, especially when walking home late or when unfamiliar faces lingered outside the foundation's office. But she stayed grounded, kept working, and never let fear stop her from doing what was right. She knew that kindness wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. And for those watching, waiting for her to slip or fade into fear, she had only one silent message. Asterisk, I'm still here. Still standing, asterisk. Maria's story became one people told over coffee, in classrooms, and across quiet family dinners, about how a simple act of feeding a poor blind man turned into something much bigger. It wasn't about money or power or even justice. It was about seeing people, really seeing them, and sometimes that one small act of kindness could echo louder than anything else in the world.